Jackie and her husband Ed seemed like a typical suburban couple. They had a wonderful life, a beautiful home, and a perfect marriage. But then Ed was brutally murdered, 3 fatal blows to the head. She was completely devastated. The investigation quickly revealed the hidden secrets behind their seemingly perfect marriage, and it was those very secrets that would ultimately lead them back to the truth. On August 20, 2000, in Manatee County, Florida, at around 7 a.m., a woman looking for a place to pull over and change her baby's diaper spotted a convenience store. But as she turned into the empty parking lot, her relief quickly turned into horror. A man's body lay sprawled on the pavement, drenched in a pool of blood. The victim had been shot multiple times in the head, and his throat was slashed. The scene was incredibly gruesome. The woman immediately called 911, and within minutes, law enforcement from Manatee County arrived at the scene. A quick search was conducted, and the pickup truck parked near the body revealed the victim's identity, Edward Postma. His wallet was found inside the vehicle, and there were no signs of robbery. If the motive wasn't theft, then how did a 32-year-old mechanic from Bradenton end up murdered in this parking lot? All investigators knew at this point was that Ed had seemingly driven himself to the convenience store before being killed. With no other leads, they decided to reach out to Ed's loved ones, hoping for answers. The first person they contacted was the victim's wife, 30-year-old Jackie Postma. Jackie Lee Gordner was born in 1970 in suburban New York, but spent most of her childhood in Florida. She had a fairly ordinary upbringing. In the 5th grade, Jackie was an outgoing, talkative, humorous, and energetic girl, a typical child who loved running and riding bikes. However, one thing she didn't like was school. Eventually, she dropped out at just 16 years old. Jackie often worked at convenience stores. By the age of 18, she already had a child and an ex-husband. By 19, she had another baby from a failed relationship and decided to part ways with that man. Jackie kept her second child and tried to raise him alone, but being a single mother was far from easy. In 1990, Jackie met Ed Postma. Like Jackie, Ed wasn't originally from Florida, and that wasn't the only thing they had in common. However, unlike Jackie, Ed was focused on his work and pursued his lifelong passion, cars. He worked as a mechanic apprentice and seemed to have a special connection with automobiles. In fact, it was this passion that led Ed to meet Jackie. At the time, she was 20 years old and had just landed a job at a truck driving school. Ed was an outgoing, friendly guy who was well liked by everyone, especially women. Jackie quickly fell for him. But just a few months into their relationship, Ed decided to see other women. Having already experienced 2 failed relationships, Jackie didn't want to lose Ed. She was determined to win him back at any cost. In the end, her efforts paid off. Ed returned to her. Soon after, the couple moved to Bradenton, Florida, to start a new chapter in their lives. Ed got a job as a mechanic at a local trucking company and focused on raising Jackie's 5-year-old son. He treated her son as if he were his own. In 1995, when Jackie was 25 years old, Ed proposed, and they had a wedding. 2 years later, the couple welcomed their first child together, a baby girl. Their family moved to a suburban complex in Bradenton, in the Palm Meadow area. By 1999, 4 years after getting married, Ed and Jackie were even able to buy their first home, a significant milestone in their married life. The couple seemed to be enjoying a happy and fulfilling life together until tragedy struck. On the morning of Sunday, August 20, 2000, at around 7:30 a.m., a passerby discovered the body of Ed Postma lying in the parking lot of a convenience store in a rural area of Manatee County, Florida. Ed had been shot multiple times in the throat and also slashed, causing him to die hours before he was found. At this point, investigators needed to find Jackie, Ed's wife, to inform her of her husband's death. Jackie was at her mother's house in Winter Haven when she received the devastating news. She appeared completely distraught and confused by the immense loss. "We're sorry to inform you, but your husband has been murdered." That evening, the entire extended family gathered at the couple's new home to console Jackie. She cried endlessly, seemingly unable to believe what had happened. However, the next day, when she sat down with investigators to answer some questions, Jackie was still sad but no longer shedding tears. She insisted that Ed had no enemies. She also said that they had been happily married for 5 years. In fact, Friday had been their anniversary, but since Jackie was at her mother's house, they couldn't celebrate together. This raised a new theory. Could Ed have gone to visit her on Saturday night to celebrate their special day? But Jackie recalled that the last time she spoke to Ed was over the phone at around midnight, and he never mentioned coming to see her. This made the case even more mysterious. Investigators began to suspect that Ed might have lied to Jackie. Based on a receipt found in his wallet, Ed had pumped gas at exactly 12:00 a.m. Shortly after, at 12:11 a.m., he called Jackie. But if Ed told Jackie he was home at that time, then he had clearly lied. Was Ed trying to surprise Jackie on their anniversary night? Or did he have an entirely different plan? Another strange detail was that the gas receipt was not from the Oasis gas station, which would have been the logical stop if he were heading home or going to see Jackie. So why did Ed stop at the convenience store? A theory emerged. Maybe someone had lured Ed there. But if this was an ambush or a robbery murder, there was one inconsistency. Ed's wallet remained untouched inside his truck. That proved that the killer's motive was not robbery. While Jackie did not want to suspect her husband of anything, investigators were starting to suspect her. On August 24, 4 days after Ed was murdered, investigators received an anonymous phone call with a shocking revelation. Jackie was having an affair. They immediately summoned Jackie for another interrogation and confronted her about the alleged affair. When asked, Jackie immediately denied it, but the investigators were not so easily convinced. They assured her that if she was lying, they would find the evidence. Even though investigators suspected Jackie's involvement in the case, they had no intention of arresting her immediately. They needed more evidence. Based on phone records, Jackie had recently spent a lot of time talking to a truck driver named Michael Cordis. When they dug deeper into Michael, they discovered something alarming. Michael was not an ordinary man. He was a convicted criminal. But how did Jackie come to know someone like that? After talking to Jackie's friends, investigators found out that she and Michael had met in June, just 2 months before Ed was murdered. Michael's mother was the one who introduced them, as she was a friend of Jackie's. It seemed that Jackie had fallen for this bad boy. According to her former neighbors, Jackie and Michael had an affair. Some even claimed that Jackie had visited Michael's workplace and was introduced as his girlfriend. This affair did not remain a secret for long. Rumors about Michael reached Ed. A friend of Ed recalled that just a few days before he was killed, she had asked Ed about Michael Cordis and whether they knew each other. Ed had responded coldly, "He's not my friend." That proved that Ed knew about Michael. But did he know the truth about the relationship between Jackie and Michael? When investigators confronted Jackie about the affair, she continued to deny it. But then, an unexpected witness appeared with a shocking confession, a confession that could change the entire course of the case. 3 weeks after Ed Postma's tragic death, Jackie Postma was still being interrogated by investigators. She stubbornly denied all accusations, even though the police had phone records and testimonies from Ed's close associates. But the truth could not be hidden forever. A conversation between Ed and his parents 4 days before he was killed revealed many things. At that time, Jackie was in Winter Haven visiting her sick mother, and Ed, over the phone, admitted that he was considering divorce. Did Jackie know about it? If she did, could she have acted first to stop Ed from leaving her? On September 15, Jackie returned to the police station, and this time the investigators gave her no way out. "Tell us the truth about everything you know," they demanded. Finally, Jackie was forced to admit to the affair with Michael Cordes, but she continued to play the role of the grieving wife, insisting that she never wanted a divorce, that it was Michael who wanted to be with her, that he promised to help raise her children. But the police were not easily deceived. Phone records revealed a crucial detail. Jackie and Michael had spoken just an hour before Ed was murdered. When asked about the call, Jackie calmly stated that Michael had told her he was in Texas and was feeling very tired. But this lie was quickly exposed. Michael was not in Texas, he was in Florida, right at the place where Ed was killed. According to the investigators' theory, Michael Cordes was the one who directly murdered Ed Postma. In the interrogation room, Jackie admitted that her relationship with Michael had given him a motive for the killing. But she insisted that Michael acted alone, claiming that divorce was much simpler than murder. The police let Jackie go, but no one believed her. The question was whether they could find evidence to prove that Jackie was lying. 11 days later, Jackie continued to deny any involvement with Ed's killer. But this time, she unexpectedly provided investigators with another name, her ex-boyfriend, Todd Martin. When police tracked Todd down for questioning, they uncovered a chilling secret. Todd confessed that on the afternoon of August 19, he had been hanging out with Michael Cordes. At that time, Michael told him about an upcoming fight and that he needed help. But the person Michael wanted to fight was none other than Ed Postma. Michael and Todd drove to Winter Haven to pick up Jackie. Together they drove to a secluded area near the convenience store where Jackie was to play the victim. She would call Ed, pretend that her car had broken down, and ask her husband to come help. When Ed arrived, he had no idea he was walking into a trap. Todd recalled that he and Michael had waited for nearly 30 minutes before Ed's truck pulled into the parking lot. In that fateful moment, Michael stepped out from the shadows, gun in hand, and fired 4 shots straight into Ed's head. Todd was horrified. He had thought this would be a simple fight, never imagining it would turn into a brutal murder. But what happened next was even more terrifying. Michael handed Todd a knife and ordered, "Finish him." Todd trembled but didn't dare refuse. He leaned over, the cold blades slicing across Ed's throat, ending the victim's life in the most gruesome way. After Todd's confession, the police wasted no time. They quickly arrested him, and within hours, Michael Cordes was also handcuffed and taken into custody. Michael Cordes remained silent, refusing to cooperate with the police. But by the end of the day, investigators had gathered enough evidence to bring Jackie back into the interrogation room once more. When the door closed, they informed her directly that Todd Martin and Michael Cordes had been arrested for Ed Postma's murder. At this point, Jackie had no escape. Unable to deny any longer, she was forced to admit that she had lured Ed to the oasis on that fateful night. However, while acknowledging her involvement, Jackie still tried to wash her hands of the crime. She insisted that she had no idea Michael planned to kill her husband. According to Jackie, when Michael called her after the murder, he said nothing about what had happened. She even pretended to be shocked, claiming she was completely devastated when the police contacted her with the news of Ed's death. But the investigators were not easily fooled. They had heard too many lies from Jackie. Right there in the interrogation room, Jackie Postma was arrested for masterminding her husband's murder. On October 14, 2 weeks after being jailed for Ed Postma's murder, Michael Cordes finally spoke. In the interrogation room, he started by admitting his relationship with Jackie, but when the discussion turned to the murder, Michael firmly declared his innocence. "I didn't kill anyone. I didn't murder anyone," he insisted. "But if Michael wasn't the killer, then who was?" According to Michael's statement, Todd Martin was the one with the real motive to kill Ed. He claimed that Jackie had paid Todd to carry out the murder, and Todd had accepted because he needed the money. Just when the case seemed straightforward, an unexpected witness came forward with shocking new details, ones that sent the story spiraling in an entirely new direction. And no one could have predicted that Jackie was still hiding another surprise. On July 6, 2001, Nearly a year after the tragic death of Ed Postma, Jackie stood before a Florida court, facing a first-degree murder charge and being accused of orchestrating the ambush of her husband. But just as all eyes were fixed on the case, Jackie shocked everyone she was pregnant. In April 2001, 7 months after her arrest, Jackie gave birth to a baby boy. The biggest question at that moment was, who was the father? Was it Ed, her late husband, or one of her lovers? A DNA test quickly provided clarity the baby was Ed's. But that truth did not change one thing. Jackie was still suspected of having murdered the child's father. The prosecutors remained unwavering. They painted a picture of a desperate woman who did not want a divorce, but also did not want her husband by her side. Faced with the prospect of losing her comfortable life, Jackie had enticed her lover into a plot to kill Ed, aiming to claim his life, insurance money, and their home. But what Jackie never anticipated was that one of her accomplices would decide to reveal the entire truth, a testimony that could change the court's final verdict. In June 2001, just a month before Jackie Postma's trial, Todd Martin pleaded guilty to his role in Ed's murder. In exchange for his testimony against Jackie, he received a 12-year prison sentence. When Todd took the stand, he testified that Jackie had given him and Michael Cordes her Honda as part of the plan. However, during cross-examination, cracks began to appear in Todd's testimony, cracks that could put the prosecution's case at risk. His narrative began to shift. Jackie had only asked Michael to beat up Ed, not to kill him. The defense immediately seized on this point, pressing Todd to recall exactly what Jackie had said when handing them the car. But the prosecution remained unfazed. They introduced a new witness, Chrissy Rogers, a friend of Michael Cordes. Chrissy testified that, weeks before the murder, she and her boyfriend, Ed Turner, had met Jackie. According to her statement, Jackie had offered Ed Turner $6,000 to kill Ed Postma, but Turner had refused. The defense quickly moved to discredit these witnesses, arguing that their testimonies were unreliable. They focused on one crucial point. Jackie was not present at the scene on the night. Ed was murdered. Jackie Postma had not pulled the trigger, and according to their argument, the real mastermind was Michael Cordes. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom with a shocking verdict. Jackie Postma, the 31-year-old woman accused of orchestrating her husband's murder, was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge wasted no time in sentencing her. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom fell into silence at the harsh sentence, but the real shock was yet to come. When it was Michael Cordes' turn, the man everyone assumed would be held accountable, a separate jury declared him not guilty. Ed's family, the prosecutors, and even those following the case were stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Even so, they found some solace in the fact that Jackie, the person they believed was behind the entire plot, would never get the chance to walk free again. Justice might not have been perfect, but at least the one they saw as the biggest culprit had paid the ultimate price. As the sun rose over the peaceful suburbs of Fairfield, New Jersey, a shocking tragedy began to unfold. An elderly mother, who had once been the emotional cornerstone of the entire family, was discovered lying motionless on the cold floor. At first glance, her death seemed to be a suicide, but the truth is always harsher than we expect. When the police arrived at the scene, they had no idea that they were about to uncover a dark secret, a story of greed, betrayal, and an unforgivable crime. And the perpetrator none other than the victim's closest relative. What truly happened on that fateful morning? Was this a meticulously planned murder, or just a moment of impulsive regret? The answer will send a chill down your spine. On July 23, 2009, in Fairfield, New Jersey, a tragedy struck in a quiet suburban home. Tina Loney and her husband, Christopher, seemed to be enjoying a stable and fulfilling life. They were capable of taking care of Tina's elderly mother, but everything suddenly collapsed. One fateful morning, Christopher was horrified to find his mother-in-law lying motionless on the floor, cold to the touch. At first glance, it appeared to be a suicide, but authorities were unsure. The investigation later uncovered a shocking truth. Tina Loney, the seemingly perfect woman, was living a double life. And the most horrifying part, the victim was her own mother. On July 23, 2009, in Fairfield, New Jersey, a small, peaceful town, at 9:00 a.m., the 911 operator received a frantic call. "My wife just found her mother on the floor. She's in critical condition. We need an ambulance right away." Within 10 minutes, the police and emergency medical team arrived at the scene. Upon arrival, they saw Christopher Loney and his wife Tina anxiously waiting at the entrance to her mother's apartment, a small space located in the basement of the house. Tina, with red eyes and sobbing, told the police that she had found 81-year-old Marie Zotti lying motionless on the floor. Immediately, an officer requested Tina to lead them to where Marie was. As they approached the body, one officer bent down, placing 2 fingers on her wrist to check for a pulse, and then he slowly raised his head, confirming a chilling truth. Marie Zotti was dead. Marie Zotti was cold to the touch. There was blood around her head, which could suggest that the 81-year-old woman had suffered an accident, possibly a heart attack, causing her to fall face first onto the floor, resulting in a bleeding wound. But when the police gently turned her body over, they made a shocking discovery. This was not a natural death. Tightly wrapped around her neck was a necktie. A suicide? Impossible, at least according to Tina. She shakily handed the police a piece of paper that she claimed to have found near the body. It contained only one line: "Tell the kids I love them." In the following days, investigators would face more questions than answers. And when the truth was finally revealed, it would lead them to a terrifying conclusion about Marie Zotti's death, one no one could have anticipated. Tina Zampi was born in 1967 and grew up in New Jersey in a family with a legal background. Her father was a police officer. Her mother, Marie Zotti, was a devout woman who devoted her life to her family, husband, children, and the church. In 1992, Tina married Christopher Loney, and not long after, the young couple moved to Fairfield, settling in a peaceful, affluent neighborhood. By 1995, their life had become stable enough that they decided to invite Tina's widowed mother, Marie, to live with them. The small apartment downstairs was the perfect place for her to be closer to her grandchildren. A year later, Tina and Chris welcomed their first child, a son, and 2 years after that, they had a daughter. The children were very close to their grandmother, calling her Nana, and Marie always showered them with love. Not only that, but she played an important role in Tina's life, a relationship that seemed incredibly close and perfect. After years of nurturing, their family decided to take a long-awaited vacation along with friends from the neighborhood to Outer Banks. On July 22, 2009, Tina happily made the final payment for the trip, but they would never set foot in Outer Banks that summer. Less than 24 hours later, Christopher called the police to report a shocking piece of news. "My wife just found her mother, dead." At first, it seemed like a suicide, but as investigators got involved, they began uncovering a dark secret, one that could completely shatter the image of this seemingly perfect family. On the morning of July 23, 2009, Tina Loney, 41 years old, called her husband Christopher in a state of panic. Her voice was trembling as she announced, "My mom, she's committed suicide." Hearing this, Christopher rushed out of work and drove home to Fairfield, New Jersey. When he arrived, he found his mother-in-law, Marie Zotti, 81 years old, lying motionless on the floor of the basement apartment. The sight left him stunned. "This can't be." He immediately called 911 and urgently requested an ambulance. But when the police arrived at the scene, things started to get strange. Tina insisted that it was a suicide, and even handed over a suicide note which she said she found near her mother's body. But what puzzled the police was the manner in which Marie died. A men's tie was tightly wrapped around her neck. There were no signs of hanging or external force. This does not fit the profile of a typical suicide. If Marie had truly taken her own life, why were there no signs of hanging? The police began to suspect that this was a murder. But who would want to kill an 81-year-old woman? A robbery? Impossible. As they searched the scene, they noticed no signs of forced entry. The front door wasn't broken, the lock was intact, and nothing was missing. So, if this wasn't a robbery, what was the real motive behind the killing? In hopes of finding a clue, the police focused on the only lead they had, Tina and Christopher Loney. Immediately, the couple was called into the Fairfield Police Department for questioning. In the interrogation video, Tina tried to stay calm as she recounted what happened. I walked around the house, looked through the window, and I saw my mom lying face down on the floor. At that point, I thought she might have fallen off the chair or something. I panicked. I ran around the house, found an unlocked window, and climbed in. When she entered her mother's apartment, Tina found that her mother had a broken hip. But what was even more shocking was the tie wrapped around her neck. At that moment, instead of calling 911 immediately, Tina called her husband first, which made the police suspicious. Why would she do that? Tina explained in a confusing manner. I think when a loved one passes, you should notify the family first. But when asked about her mother's supposed suicide, Tina couldn't provide a clear answer. She only recalled a strange conversation they had a few weeks before. My mom told the kids, "You don't need me. You won't remember me." The words seemed to have a negative implication, but it wasn't enough to conclude that Marie had wanted to take her own life. Then the police asked an important question. The tie wrapped around her mother's neck. Whose was it? Tina hesitated for a moment before answering. It's my husband's. A shock. Why would an 81-year-old woman commit suicide with her son-in-law's tie? This raised further suspicions that there was something suspicious about the death of Marie Zotti. The case slowly unfolds. The mystery of the tie. Could Christopher be involved in his mother-in-law's death? When the police interrogated Christopher, his testimony completely matched what Tina had said. He confirmed, I don't know what happened before my wife called. When I got there, my mother-in-law was dead, and Tina had covered her up. All I know is what my wife told me. But the investigators weren't easily convinced. When the autopsy results were released, everything became clearer. Marie Zotti did not commit suicide. She was murdered. The examination showed that the cause of death was strangulation. She couldn't have suffocated herself with the tie, and there were no signs of hanging. Someone had strangled her to death. Her broken ribs indicated a struggle or violence, and the time of death was one day before Tina reported it to the police. What does that mean? Marie Zotti had been dead since Wednesday morning, yet Tina and Christopher went about their day, apparently unaware that a dead body was downstairs. That seemed implausible. New clues. The Loney family's secret. The police began to investigate the Loney family's life in more detail. They uncovered a shocking truth. The electricity had been cut off for months due to unpaid bills. Marie was being sued for credit card debt. The house was facing foreclosure, and the family was in a severe financial crisis. Could Marie's death be related to financial issues? Tina Loney disappears. A shocking twist on Friday afternoon. Just as the police were preparing to summon Tina for a second round of questioning, Christopher walked into the police station with a shocking announcement. My wife is missing. What was going on? Tina had disappeared just as the police were about to question her again. Soon, investigators would pressure Tina to face the truth, and she would reveal a shocking secret. July 24, 2009, more than 24 hours since Tina and Christopher reported Marie Zotti's death to the police. Initially, everything seemed like a suicide. Tina testified. She found her mother dead in the basement, and then called her husband, Christopher. He was working, and after receiving the news, he rushed home and called the police. But the investigators had an important task. Was this a murder or truly a suicide? The autopsy results provided the answer. Marie did not commit suicide. She was murdered. And the suicide note no longer made sense. Before the police could interrogate Tina again, something unexpected happened. Christopher walked into the police station and reported, "My wife is missing." Tina had disappeared just when the investigation was about to make a breakthrough. What was she running from? Soon, the investigators would follow the trail to uncover the horrifying truth behind this case. Morning of July 24, 2009, Tina Loney suddenly disappears. Christopher's testimony. The whole family had spent the night at his sister's house, and no one slept well after the tragedy. Tina looked distressed, anxious, and almost in shock. At 6 a.m., both of them woke up. At 6:15 a.m., Tina said she wanted to go shopping. Christopher offered to go with her, but she firmly refused. After that, Tina disappeared without a trace. Christopher, worried, called a friend and spent hours driving around town looking for her. There was no sign of Tina, and fearing she might do something reckless, Christopher decided to call the police. But the investigators had another theory. If Tina was the murderer, was Christopher hiding the truth for her? If Christopher were the killer, had he done something to Tina as well? Interrogation room. Christopher investigated. He was questioned about the family's life, particularly the financial problems. The police discovered that Christopher had no idea about the massive debt Tina had pushed the family into. He was shocked to learn that they were going bankrupt. Shocking statement from the police. Tina Loney is now the primary suspect in the murder of her mother. But why would she kill her own mother? Does the family's financial crisis have anything to do with this case? The most important thing right now is to find Tina before it's too late. The search for Tina was unsuccessful, but an important clue emerged. Where did Tina go after she disappeared? She walked to a store, then took a bus to Atlantic City. But instead of mourning her mother's death, Tina took a shocking action. Less than 24 hours after her mother's murder, Tina appeared at the Trump Marina Casino. Security cameras recorded her playing slot machines on the boardwalk. The police followed the trail, but when they arrived, Tina had disappeared. The trail grew cold. However, Fairfield police received an emergency 911 call. Could this be the breakthrough to uncover the truth? Why did Tina go to the casino? Where did the family's money go? The truth was about to be revealed. On July 27, 2009, an emergency call from a citizen walking his dog helped police find Tina Loney. She was walking on Long Acres Road, and in her purse, investigators found suicide notes addressed to her husband, Christopher. The truth began to unfold. Just an hour after her arrest, Tina sat in front of the camera, ready to reveal the entire truth. "Do you want me to tell you what happened to my mother?" An open-ended, ominous question from Tina. Tina confessed to killing her mother. She recalled the heartbreaking details of how she killed Marie. The first used the tie to strangle my mother to death. A shocking twist. Tina's confession not only involved the death of her mother, but also revealed a huge secret. She had been having an affair. Christopher had no idea about his wife's extramarital affair and was completely unaware of the murder. The deception was exposed. Tina admitted everything, and when the confession ended, she was arrested for murder. As Tina was taken to Essex County Jail, Christopher was still grappling with the horrifying truth about his wife and mother. The price of betrayal and crime. Could Christopher overcome this shock? On May 7, 2013, Tina Loney, 45, was led into the courtroom in New Jersey to face the unimaginable crime, the brutal murder of her elderly mother, Marie Zappi, 81. Although she had confessed to the crime from the start, Tina later retracted her confession and stated that she had been in a state of confusion when making the statement. Investigators uncovered key details about Tina's motive. According to the prosecution, Tina killed her mother for money. Part of the reason for this was to continue her gambling behavior, which Marie could not accept. The financial motive behind the crime. After investigation, it was revealed that Tina was deeply in debt and needed money to pay off the debts and continue gambling at casinos. trial verdict, the jury reached a verdict at the end of the trial, and Tina Loney was found guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison for killing her mother to seize her money. A shocking crime that stunned the community, as no one could believe that a daughter would be willing to kill her own mother just for money to feed her gambling habit. This case left an indelible wound in the hearts of Marie Zappi's family and friends. Tina Loney now faces a harsh sentence for her heinous crime. Karen Newell always knew how to attract men, and her new husband was no exception. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to have it all. Their marriage appeared happy, but just 9 months later, tragedy struck. Her husband was murdered right before her eyes in a brutal robbery. The attackers demanded his wallet, but something felt off. Everything seemed too staged, too perfect to be just a random mugging. Was this truly a simple carjacking? Or was the killer a jealous lover, lurking in the shadows? The deeper the police dug, the more suspicious they became. Was this marriage truly built on love? Or was it from the start a perfect facade to hide a ruthless plan? A plan where the price to be paid was John's life. Orange County, Florida, late night, February 20, 1994. On a desolate highway between Cocoa Beach and Orlando, a car suddenly pulled over. In the dim headlights of passing vehicles, a young woman frantically waved her hands, pleading for help. She approached every car that slowed down, and whenever someone stopped, she uttered only one sentence: "Help me. My husband has been shot." Her name was Karen Newell, and the man lying motionless on the pavement, drenched in blood, was her husband, John. He had been shot multiple times. Several drivers stopped to try and help, but it was too late. When the sheriff arrived at the scene just minutes later, he confirmed what everyone feared: John was dead. According to Karen, that night, she and her husband were driving back home to Orlando after a long day at the beach when their car started having issues. When John stepped out to check under the hood, a small sedan pulled up behind them. 3 men were inside. At first, Karen thought they were stopping to help, but no 2 of them stepped out and immediately demanded John's wallet. Karen recalled that the robbery happened too fast. 1 second, they were simply asking for money, and the next, John collapsed to the ground, shot multiple times. The attackers jumped back into their car, sped off, and left her husband bleeding out by the roadside. But the most horrifying part wasn't just the immediate loss. Karen was pregnant. The killers didn't just take John's life. They took away the father of her unborn child. Karen Newell didn't have an easy life. Growing up in hardship left a deep mark on her, but it couldn't extinguish the strong spirit of this young woman. Despite her captivating beauty, Karen's love life was far from smooth. By the end of her 20s, she had already been married and divorced twice. In the spring of 1993, at the age of 28, Karen seemed more focused on her career. The brunette wasn't just striving for success at work, she was also trying her luck in local beauty pageants, hoping to chase her dream of becoming a model. But perhaps Karen's true stroke of luck didn't come from the runway. It came from a small bar in the suburbs of Orlando. That was where she met John Newell. From the first glance, Karen might have been drawn to the tall man with striking blue eyes. But John wasn't just handsome, he was a master mechanic with a good salary, 2 cars of his own, and a decent amount of savings. That night, John took Karen home. But their connection wasn't just a fleeting romance. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, and perhaps something mysterious that set her apart. As for Karen, she too was swept up in the whirlwind romance with John. Before long, their relationship became more serious than ever. On May 22, 1993, just 2 months after their passionate first night, John and Karen decided to get married. Everything happened so quickly, but both seemed to believe they had found their soulmate. After the wedding, Karen excitedly shared with John about a new career opportunity. She claimed that thanks to her connections in the modeling industry, she had landed a job involving television product promotions. This meant a packed schedule, frequent travel, and constant busyness. But Karen reassured her husband that no matter where she went, she would always come back to him. 7 months into their marriage, Karen announced joyful news. She was pregnant with their first child. John was overwhelmed with happiness. He eagerly awaited the moment he would become a father, believing that the baby's arrival would bring them closer than ever. Sean, a close friend of John's, once said that John loved Karen deeply. He always made an effort to keep the romance alive in their relationship. Just days after Valentine's Day in 1994, the couple even planned a short getaway to the beach, a way to enjoy some sweet moments together before their child was born. But no one could have predicted that this would be one of their last moments together. On Sunday morning, February 20, John and Karen packed their bags, got in their car, and drove an hour east to the beach. They spent the entire day enjoying the fresh ocean breeze before heading back to Orlando in the evening. But as they passed the toll booth at exactly 5:28 p.m. and turned onto State Road 520, things took a strange turn. The car suddenly showed signs of malfunction. John and Karen decided to pull over. John stepped out to check, but within seconds, a horrifying event unfolded. Late Sunday night, February 20, 1994, in Orange County, Florida, a brutal murder occurred on a desolate highway outside Orlando. The victim was John Newell, 29, husband of Karen Newell. By the time police arrived at the scene, John was already dead. His distraught wife, Karen, recounted to detectives that their car had broken down, and just as John stepped out to inspect it, a strange vehicle suddenly pulled up beside them. 3 men got out demanding John's wallet, but in the blink of an eye, according to Karen, one of them pulled out a gun and fired multiple shots at her husband. Despite being in shock, Karen was able to provide police with crucial details. She described the attackers' appearances, their car, and even remembered part of the license plate, along with a distinctive bad boy sticker on the rear window. Police immediately issued an urgent alert and launched a manhunt for the killers. Based on the .22 caliber shell casings found at the scene, investigators determined that the 3 suspects were armed and extremely dangerous. However, one odd detail stood out: the assailants had fled so quickly that they left behind John's wallet, the very thing they had demanded in the first place. That night, law enforcement focused on tracking down the car with the bad boy sticker while also heading to the hospital to continue questioning Karen. She was still distraught but lucid enough to answer their questions. A complex case was beginning to unravel. According to Karen's statement, she and John had spent a joyful day at the beach, where they were later joined by a friend named P.J. Giffen. P.J. was not just a friend, but also Karen's assistant, helping her with film production work. After a long day in the sun and waves, the 3 of them left Karen and John in one car, while P.J. drove separately. On the way back to Orlando, Karen claimed she had been following P.J.'s car, but lost sight of him after passing a toll booth. It was then that her car started malfunctioning, with the steering wheel shaking abnormally. John, a skilled mechanic, told Karen to pull over so he could take a look. Karen stated that they both got out of the car. She walked around to check the wheels, while John inspected under the hood. At that moment, another car suddenly approached from behind. Karen, who was crouched near the front of their vehicle, didn't see everything clearly. Then, gunshots rang out. In the chaos, Karen took cover near the front of the car, confused and terrified by what was happening. She initially thought it was just a robbery, but what she couldn't understand was why the attackers murdered John and then left without taking his wallet. Instead of immediately suspecting the grieving widow of lying, investigators chose to explore other possible leads. Instead of rushing to accuse the newly widowed Karen of lying, investigators decided to broaden their investigation. A police report revealed that not long before John was murdered, there had been an attempted break-in at the Newells' home. Around 9 p.m. that night, as darkness settled outside, Karen heard strange noises coming from the backyard. She immediately alerted John, but as he stepped outside to check, he was suddenly ambushed by 2 masked men wielding baseball bats. They brutally attacked him, leaving him in a terrible state. Fortunately, a neighbor heard the commotion and turned on their lights, scaring off the assailants. Karen quickly called 911. Though John was not seriously injured, he was unable to provide any useful information beyond the fact that someone had apparently tried to break into their home. At the time, the incident was dismissed as a failed burglary. However, when John was murdered just a few months later, the break-in took on a far more sinister implication. Investigators began interviewing John's friends and family, but no one could point to any known enemies. John was known as a kind-hearted man, always willing to help others. Yet a surprising detail emerged recently. John had taken in a new roommate, none other than Peter P.J. Giffen, Karen's assistant. What raised eyebrows even more was that P.J. had moved in right after the break-in, and according to accounts, it was Karen who had suggested it. "Why don't we let my young assistant move in? He's such a nice guy." John, trusting and easygoing, agreed without hesitation. But now, police began asking a critical question. Was there something suspicious between Karen and PJ? Was their relationship more than what they let on? And if so, was John's death really a random robbery, or was there a deeper, more calculated crime at play? By late February 1994, a week had passed since Karen Newell had witnessed her husband's murder on a deserted stretch of highway outside Orlando, Florida. She claimed that the robbers had suddenly jumped out of their car, confronted John, and demanded his wallet. However, investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Office were growing increasingly skeptical of her story. They began questioning the relationship between Karen and Peter P.J. Giffen. Were they really just friends? And was the child Karen was carrying truly John's? Shortly after the murder, police summoned P.J. for questioning. He partially corroborated Karen's story about the three of them spending the day at the beach. P.J. claimed that he had consumed 12 cans of daiquiri, smoked marijuana, and then driven home ahead of Karen and John. But when investigators traveled to P.J.'s hometown of Port St. Lucie and started digging, his story began to unravel. Contrary to Karen's claims, P.J. was not her production assistant. In reality, he was nearly jobless, a high school dropout, drifting aimlessly through life. John's friends had long suspected that P.J. and Karen were involved in something more than just friendship. But what shocked investigators even more was how their relationship had actually begun. In the summer of 1993 on Florida's Turnpike, P.J. happened to spot Karen driving alone with a pair of handcuffs in her car. Jokingly, he told her to cuff him. But instead of laughing it off, Karen gave him a sly smile and began flirting with the teenager. Before long, the two had plunged into a secret affair. But while Karen may have seen P.J. as nothing more than a reckless fling, P.J. believed it was true love. He even told friends that he was married to Karen, an absurd claim, but one that revealed much about his mindset. What intrigued police most was P.J.'s potential motive. If Karen was pregnant with his child, then John was the only obstacle standing in their way. And if that were true, P.J. had every reason to want John gone for good. Although confirming the affair between Karen and P.J. provided a clear motive, investigators still needed concrete evidence to link them to the murder. Specifically, they needed to locate the murder weapon, a .22 caliber gun, based on shell casings found at the scene. Over the following days, police questioned the couple's friends, but a shocking revelation came when they spoke with one of Karen's ex-husbands. They discovered something even more suspicious. P.J. wasn't the only man Karen had been involved with. She had remained in contact with her ex-husband and had even borrowed a gun from him. At the time, her request seemed reasonable to the former spouse, especially given that John had recently survived a brutal baseball bat attack. But the most incriminating detail? The gun Karen borrowed was a .22 caliber, the exact same type as the murder weapon. A simple ballistics test could confirm if this was the gun used in the killing. However, when police asked Karen's ex to turn over the firearm, they hit a roadblock. Karen had never returned it. Now investigators were certain she was involved in the crime. But rather than rushing to arrest her, they needed ironclad evidence that would hold up in court. As they dug deeper into her past, they unearthed another crucial detail. Back in 1989, Karen had a criminal record for credit card fraud. On February 28, 8 days after her husband's murder, Karen Newell was arrested by the Orange County Sheriff's Office for violating her probation. While she was in custody, investigators continued gathering evidence. They interviewed a man named Louis Aragona, Karen's stepbrother, and uncovered a bombshell revelation. According to Louis, as early as the summer of 1993, Karen had approached him with a chilling proposal. John had a $500 life insurance policy, and she wanted Louis to help plan his murder so she could cash in. Louis refused to take part in the shooting, but he revealed something even more disturbing. Karen had already attempted to kill John in November 1993 with P.J. Giffen as her accomplice. Their plan was to murder John in his own home. However, when P.J. attacked, John cried out in pain, prompting neighbors to turn on their lights and look outside. Fearing exposure, P.J. panicked and fled. Karen didn't give up. Just days after the failed attack, she again reached out to Louis, urging him to help her carry out the plan. Once again he refused, but P.J., he didn't. This revelation marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. If Louis's account was true, it proved that Karen and P.J. had conspired to kill John long before the supposed random robbery took place. By late March 1994, the case had reached a turning point. Acting on a search warrant, police discovered a safe in John's home, registered in Karen's name. Inside, they found a trove of financial documents, including all of John's life insurance policies. The most shocking find, a $500,000 life insurance policy with Karen as the sole beneficiary. Not only that, but investigators uncovered a damning fact. In the week following John's death, Karen had already begun withdrawing money from the insurance payouts. She showed no signs of grief. Instead, she had swiftly contacted the insurance companies, demanding the money. The evidence was undeniable. This was no random robbery. It was a carefully orchestrated murder for money scheme. On March 28, 1994, less than a month after P.J. Giffen's arrest, both Karen and her teenage lover were officially charged with the murder of John Newell. In the trial of Karen Newell, prosecutors painted a picture of a cunning woman who had planned her husband's murder from the very beginning of their relationship. They argued that Karen had set her sights on John Newell as early as March 1993, not for love, but for his life insurance money. Just weeks after their wedding in May 1993, she secured the first $250,000 policy, then continued adding more over their 9-month marriage. This ensured that when John died, Karen would become rich. But she needed someone else to pull the trigger, and Peter P.J. Giffen was the perfect pawn. According to prosecutors, Karen used her charm to manipulate P.J., a naive young man, turning him into a killer. She promised love, used sex as a weapon, and even lied about being pregnant with his child to deepen his involvement in the plot. But that lie unraveled the night John was killed. When Karen was taken to the hospital, doctors ran a pregnancy test. It was negative. Even more damning, her medical records revealed that she had previously undergone tubal ligation, making pregnancy impossible. With this mountain of evidence, prosecutors were convinced that Karen was not just guilty of murder, she was a cold-blooded mastermind willing to do anything to get what she wanted. They sought the death penalty. The final piece of evidence came from P.J. Giffen's own testimony. Facing the possibility of a death sentence, he broke his silence in the interrogation room. He confessed everything: the affair, the murder plot, and how Karen had manipulated him into carrying it out. According to P.J., after their failed attempt to kill John with a baseball bat in November 1993, Karen immediately devised a new plan. On February 20, 1994, she, John, and PJ spent the day at the beach, enjoying themselves as if nothing was wrong. But on the drive back to Orlando, she created the perfect opportunity for PJ to strike. Karen drove ahead while PJ followed in his own car. After passing a toll booth, Karen pretended to have car trouble. She told John they needed to pull over and check the vehicle. As they stopped on the roadside, PJ, with the murder weapon in hand, approached. Without hesitation, he aimed the gun at John's head and said, "Consider this a divorce." Then he pulled the trigger. John collapsed, but PJ didn't stop. He fired 3 more shots into John's chest, ensuring he was dead. PJ's confession not only sealed Karen's fate, but also led investigators to the most critical piece of physical evidence, the murder weapon. He revealed that after the killing, he had tossed the gun into a lake a few miles from the crime scene. When police searched the designated area, they found the weapon. Ballistics tests confirmed it was the gun that fired the fatal bullets, but the most damning evidence? The gun's serial number matched the firearm Karen had borrowed from her ex-husband before the attack. This directly linked her to the murder weapon, proving she had orchestrated every detail of her deadly plan. With PJ's testimony, the recovered gun, and a clear financial motive, prosecutors had everything they needed to charge Karen with first-degree murder. Karen Newell's case was no longer a mystery. She had not only manipulated a teenager into killing for her, but had also calculated every move to ensure her plan's success. But would she receive the death penalty as prosecutors hoped? That decision lay in the hands of the jury. Facing overwhelming evidence, Karen Newell had no choice but to take a plea deal to avoid execution. The agreement between her defense and prosecutors spared her from the death sentence, but sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for PJ Giffen, despite being the one who pulled the trigger, his cooperation with authorities earned him a reduced charge of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison, a price for being manipulated into Karen's deadly scheme. The case closed with both conspirators behind bars, but the tragedy remained. A man lost his life, all because of greed and the betrayal of a wife he had trusted. New York City, morning of November 11, 2006. The clock struck 6:15 when Donna Cobb, 38 years old, called the emergency 911 hotline from her apartment in Harlem. Her voice was urgent, panicked. "My husband needs an ambulance," Donna told the dispatcher. As a nursing assistant at Harlem Hospital Center, Donna understood the severity of the situation. She gasped for breath, trying to explain, "I fought with my husband, Kevin Calm, 39 years old. I hit him with something. I don't know if he's breathing. His heart is still beating, but I call him and he's not responding." The dispatcher asked, "What did you hit him with?" Donna hesitated for a moment before replying, "A small elephant, a ceramic elephant." What seemed like a harmless blow had left Kevin motionless on the floor, setting off an investigation filled with surprises and untold secrets. As the ambulance raced to the scene, Donna, relying on her medical training, did everything she could to help Kevin. She knelt beside him, desperately trying to maintain his breathing. When the EMTs finally arrived, they quickly took over CPR from Donna and immediately used a defibrillator. Flashing lights reflected off the walls as they lifted Kevin onto the stretcher, rushing him down the stairs to the ambulance. No one could be sure if he would survive. Amid the blaring sirens echoing through the cold morning air, the police turned to Donna for answers. But as they looked at her, they realized she wasn't much better off than her husband. Donna trembled, her gaze empty, as if she had just endured a never-ending nightmare. Donna Brown was born in 1968 in Georgia, but her heart always belonged to Harlem, where she considered her true home. As a teenager, Donna possessed striking beauty, drawing attention wherever she went. However, her life took an unexpected turn in her final year of high school when she discovered she was pregnant. After giving birth, Donna refused to let it hinder her future. Determined to succeed, she enrolled in the Advanced Vocational Academy. Shortly after graduating, she began working as a certified nursing assistant. Hardworking, dedicated, and always full of energy, Donna not only earned the respect of her colleagues but also became a beloved figure among patients. Yet, despite her success at work, her personal life was plagued with bad relationships. By 1992, at the age of 23, Donna was already a single mother of 4, bearing the full responsibility of raising them with pride. It was during this time, when she was solely focused on her family and career, that Kevin Cobb, a 24-year-old man, stepped into her life, determined to win her attention at all costs. Kevin Cobb, a young man from the Bronx, first met Donna in 1992 while standing on a street corner in Harlem. That day, Donna was rushing to pick up her daughter, but Kevin wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. He tried to strike up a conversation, even though Donna, a busy mother of 4, clearly had no time to stop. However, Kevin's persistence was undeniable. He followed her for 10 blocks, chatting nonstop, and in the end, he won her over. Kevin gave his heart entirely to Donna, and his love made her more willing to embrace the relationship. A year later, in 1993, Kevin moved in with Donna. But from there, harsh reality began to set in. Kevin was unemployed, meaning Donna had to shoulder the financial burden for the entire family alone. In 1998, they welcomed a set of twins, the embodiment of their love. At this point, their small home became more cramped than ever with 6 children. Donna, with a modest salary as a nursing assistant, struggled to provide for the whole family. She hoped Kevin would help by spending time with the children or assisting with their schoolwork. But instead he was often out all night and slept through the day. A creeping sense of unease began to settle in Donna, and she started to suspect Kevin was involved with drugs. Her fears were soon confirmed. One afternoon, Donna found undeniable evidence. When she confronted Kevin, he tried to justify himself, promising to quit and find a job to support the family. But these were empty words. His addiction worsened, and by 2001, Kevin was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison for drug use. At first, Donna felt relieved that Kevin was out of her life, but distance didn't cool their feelings for each other. From behind bars, Kevin kept in touch with her, and once again, Donna couldn't let go. By 2003, shortly after his release, they decided to get married, believing it would be a fresh start for both of them. Life seemed to be on the right track until tragedy struck. New York City, early morning of November 11, 2006. At 6:30 a.m. on a Saturday, ambulance sirens wailed through the streets of Harlem as NYPD officers and paramedics rushed to a small apartment. Inside, Donna Cobb was in a state of panic, kneeling over her unconscious husband, Kevin, who lay on the floor with a severe chest wound, blood pooling around him. As paramedics took over CPR, police pulled Donna aside to understand what had happened. She stammered, her voice choked with fear. According to Donna's statement that morning, she had been sleeping in her daughter's bed when Kevin suddenly attacked her. He jumped on me. I panicked and ran to the living room, but he chased me, pinned me down, stomped on me, and strangled me until I couldn't breathe. In a desperate struggle, Donna grabbed the first thing within reach, a porcelain elephant statue, and struck Kevin hard on the head. For a brief moment, she managed to turn the tables, but as Kevin collapsed, motionless, blood quickly seeped through his shirt. The police were skeptical of Donna's story. There were no witnesses to back up her claims. Only she and Kevin had been in that room. So far, all they had to go on was Donna's version of events. But why would Kevin try to kill her? How had a couple that reconciled after prison taken such a terrible turn? Donna told the police that in the early years, after Kevin was released from prison in 2003, he had genuinely changed. He spent time with the family, went to church, and tried to be a good husband and father. But that peace only lasted 2 years. After that, Kevin relapsed, and this time, things got worse. Donna claimed that the amount of drugs he used was more than before, and with that came terrifying paranoia. He began suspecting her of infidelity, even though Donna insisted there was no one else. But no matter how much she tried to explain, Kevin refused to believe her. His addiction deepened, and with it came his jealous rage. Kevin started controlling me, Donna said, and his jealousy often ended in violence. But if Kevin was truly abusing her, why didn't Donna leave? The police asked this question, and her answer left them in silence. I stayed for the children, she said. Donna endured the abuse, hid the bruises, and tolerated the fights just to keep the family together. And then, that night happened. Donna recounted that the night before, they had thrown a birthday party for Kevin's cousin. The children were sent to spend the night with relatives, and at first the party was enjoyable. But soon after, a fight broke out between Kevin's cousin and his brother. When it was over, Kevin was the one who had lost. Angry and humiliated, he kicked everyone out and then left, seemingly to find drugs. Donna didn't know where he had been all night. She slept in her daughter's bed and only woke up when Kevin returned around 6 a.m. He had been drinking. Before she could react, Kevin's fury exploded. He jumped on me, hit me, and strangled me. When the police examined her face and neck, they found visible scratches and bruises, as if her story was true. But then, the investigation took a shocking turn when they searched the apartment. The discovery made them question everything. Why hadn't Donna mentioned stabbing Kevin? By late morning on November 11, 2006, Donna Cobb, 38, sat in the interrogation room of the police station. The officers informed her that Kevin had died. Despite everything she had just told them about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her late husband, she was still in shock and disbelief at the news. But Kevin's death wasn't the only thing that left Donna horrified. The police were beginning to suspect her. While investigating Kevin's background, they confirmed that he had served time for drug offenses, but there was no record of him ever being violent. What was even more alarming was that when investigators searched the couple's apartment, they found signs that someone had attempted to clean up the crime scene. But the most shocking discovery was a small yet haunting object, a simple butter knife covered in blood. Donna had never mentioned stabbing Kevin. When confronted with the evidence, she denied trying to clean the scene. But the police knew one thing for certain: blood had been wiped away. Someone had tried to hide something. And then finally Donna admitted that she had stabbed Kevin. Now, with Kevin dead, all the police had was Donna's account of what really happened on that fateful morning. When Kevin returned home at around 6 a.m. that morning, the children were not home. He lost control. Kevin punched Donna and pulled her hair. After a struggle, she managed to break free from his grip, but she only made it as far as the living room. Kevin quickly caught up and tackled her to the ground. In a panic, Donna tried to turn over and grabbed a porcelain elephant figurine from the floor. She smashed it against Kevin's face, causing him to stumble for a brief moment, just enough time for her to escape again. But only seconds later, Kevin caught her once more in the bedroom. He beat her relentlessly, then tried to strangle her until she couldn't breathe. In a desperate moment, fighting for her life, Donna frantically searched for something, anything that could help her defend herself. Her hand landed on a knife. Without thinking, she plunged it into Kevin's chest. As she freed herself from his grip and saw the blood pouring out, Donna realized how badly Kevin was wounded. She immediately called 911 and tried to administer first aid. But when the paramedics arrived on the scene, along with the police, Donna lied. She didn't mention the knife. And it was this dishonesty that put the police in a difficult position. Was anything, Donna said, actually true? When someone is caught lying, all of their statements become questionable. In the end, after finishing their interrogation, the police calmly placed Donna in handcuffs. She was charged with second-degree murder, and for a mother of 6, this charge could mean an incredibly harsh sentence. In 2010, nearly 4 years had passed since Donna Cobb admitted to stabbing her husband Kevin. Yet, she still had not had her day in court. The New York District Attorney's Office did not seem in a hurry to prosecute the 42-year-old mother who was raising 6 children alone. On the other hand, the victim, Kevin, was a drug addict, a former convict, and had a history of doing truly terrible things. But that did not mean the prosecution was planning to drop the case. From the day she was arrested on a second-degree murder charge, Donna had lived in limbo for 4 years, and the biggest nightmare she faced was that if convicted, she could be sentenced to life in prison. On September 27, the trial of Donna Cobb officially began. Prosecutors argued that Donna was not a victim of domestic abuse as she claimed. They asserted that most of her allegations about Kevin abusing her were fabricated after the fact to cover up the truth about what she had done. According to Donna's initial statement to the police, she had stabbed Kevin with the knife while he was on top of her. However, when the medical examiner was called to testify, he stated that the autopsy results told a completely different story. Evidence showed that the blade had penetrated Kevin's chest about 3 inches deep, a wound that could not have been caused by a weak thrust. Notably, it was only a butter knife, meaning it would have required significant force to cut through like that. To further support this argument, the prosecution called a crime scene investigator. He pointed out that, contrary to Donna's claims, the blood pattern on the bed indicated that Kevin had not been on top of her when he was stabbed. In fact, he believed Donna had stabbed Kevin while he was lying on his back in bed, possibly while he was asleep. If this evidence was not compelling enough, the prosecution presented another shocking detail. Donna had not called 911 immediately. According to phone records, the first person Donna contacted while her husband was bleeding on the floor was not emergency services, it was her mother. It took another 13 minutes before Donna finally dialed 911, an amount of time that could have made the difference between life and death. When defending herself, Donna firmly denied attacking Kevin while he was asleep. She insisted she had not been standing over him when she stabbed him. However, she also had to admit that she had called her mother before calling emergency services. According to Donna's testimony, the reason she didn't call 911 immediately was that she didn't believe Kevin's life was in danger. After all, the wound had been inflicted with a butter knife. But when she saw that Kevin was still bleeding, she decided to get her phone to call for help. However, Donna testified that Kevin stopped her, urging her not to call. She also admitted to lying to the police out of fear. During the trial, some of Donna's 6 children testified that Kevin frequently beat her. However, the question remained, was that enough to prove that Donna had acted in self-defense? Prosecutors quickly reminded the jury that at the time Kevin was stabbed, no one else was in the apartment to witness what had actually happened. On October 12, 2010, after nearly 4 years of waiting, Donna Cobb sat in a Manhattan courtroom listening to the jury's decision. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their final verdict. Donna Cobb was not guilty on all charges. The court concluded that Donna had acted reasonably to protect herself from the threat of being killed. As the verdict was announced, Donna and her children broke down in tears of joy. Her friends and supporters were also overjoyed with the outcome. Abraham Shakespeare won the lottery jackpot, his life changing in an instant. But not long after, he mysteriously disappeared. People said that he was surrounded by money hunters who saw him as nothing more than a cash cow. And then Dee Moore appeared, a successful businesswoman who claimed to be Abraham's trustworthy friend. But was she really helping him? Or was there something darker hidden behind the facade? Plant City, Florida, January 26, 2010. One of the biggest mysteries in Tampa's history was about to be revealed. Dozens of reporters crowded together. Camera lenses pointed directly at a piece of land being excavated. Everyone was waiting for the answer to the question that had haunted the public for months. Abraham Shakespeare, the lottery millionaire who had vanished without a trace, was he still alive or already dead? 3 years after his life-changing win, Abraham suddenly went missing, and no one knew where he was. In November 2009, his family reported him to the police, but no one had any leads on his whereabouts. Nearly 2 months later, the case took a chilling turn. Mysterious excavation began after the police received information from none other than Abraham's close friend and financial advisor, Dee Moore. There were up to 30, maybe even 40 news crews gathered at the scene, eager to capture the first glimpse of what could be the ultimate proof of Abraham Shakespeare's fate. And as the last layer of soil was lifted, the truth began to emerge. Born in 1972 in Plant City, Florida, Doris Donegan, also known as Didi, always longed for a better life. As a child, she was an active member of women's Bible study classes, but as she grew older, she started feeling that something was missing. She became increasingly aware of her humble origins, a reality she tried to hide throughout her high school years. But instead of letting poverty hold her back, Didi nurtured an unrelenting determination. She was going to succeed at all costs. After graduating, Didi enrolled in training courses and became a certified nursing assistant, CNA. Not long after, she married James Moore, a man from Plant City, and 3 years later, they welcomed a son. But Didi didn't want to settle for a stable job. She wanted more. In 2004, fueled by her burning ambition, Didi started her own business and quickly found success. From a girl who grew up in poverty, she rose to become a wealthy and powerful woman. But Didi wasn't satisfied with simply enjoying her riches. She wanted to share her story, to inspire others with her journey from rags to riches by writing a book. And then, fate led her to Abraham Shakespeare, the man who had won millions in the lottery. This encounter not only changed Didi's life, but also marked the beginning of a horrifying mystery. Abraham Shakespeare grew up in Lakeland, Florida, in circumstances even harsher than Didi. He dropped out of school early, but instead of following the path of many other young men in the neighborhood who fell into gangs or drug addiction, Abraham chose to become a hard-working laborer. He was not an addict, nor was he a criminal, but his life seemed destined to be a constant struggle with meager wages. Until one day, everything changed. In October 2006, in a rare moment of luck, Abraham bought a lottery ticket at a convenience store. And no one could have imagined that the ticket would win him a $30 million jackpot. Choosing to receive a lump sum payment after taxes, Abraham took home approximately $12.7 million. From a manual laborer, he stepped into the world of millionaires. He bought a mansion in an upscale neighborhood, purchased a fleet of BMWs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But fortune came quickly and disappeared just as fast. In less than 2 years of spending and generously lending money to friends, Abraham's bank account rapidly dwindled. By the end of 2008, when he met Didi Moore, he had only a little over $1 million left. This meeting was no coincidence. A mutual friend had arranged for Didi to meet Abraham, and immediately Didi realized he didn't need a writer to tell his story. He needed a financial manager. And Didi, with her extensive business experience, was ready to take on that role. Before long, Didi was not only helping Abraham manage his finances, but also assisting him in recovering up to $8 million stat he had lent to friends over the past 2 years. But did Didi truly want to help Abraham, or did she have an entirely different plan? This question could only be answered by the horrifying truth that followed. On November 9, 2009, a man named Cedric Adama walked into the police station with growing concern. His cousin, Abraham Shakespeare, the man whose life had changed after winning millions from the Florida lottery, had vanished without a trace. Cedric was not the only one who had borrowed money from Abraham, but unlike many others, he claimed to have fully repaid his debt. However, what was strange was that for the past 8 months, Cedric had not directly returned the money to Abraham, but had instead transferred it to a woman named Didi Moore. And now, after 7 months without any news from his cousin, Cedric decided to report Abraham's disappearance to the police. The police immediately launched an investigation, and the first person they sought out was Didi Moore. At that time, Didi had recently divorced, but more significantly, she had moved into the multi-million-dollar mansion that previously belonged to Abraham Shakespeare. When asked, Didi showed no signs of worry or secrecy. She explained that Abraham had voluntarily sold the house to her at his own request. Not only that, but he had also given her full control over most of his assets. She even provided a signed power of attorney from Abraham to prove her statement. Didi enthusiastically cooperated, providing all financial records related to Abraham. But there was one crucial question she could not answer. Where exactly was Abraham Shakespeare? According to Didi, Abraham had decided to keep his whereabouts a secret, even from her. But she insisted she was still in contact with him. To prove it, right in front of the investigators, Didi pulled out her phone and sent a message. "Abraham, everyone is looking for you. Please respond immediately." While waiting for a response from Abraham, the investigation team expanded their search. They began reaching out to his friends and family for clues. But what shocked the police was that no one had seen or heard from Abraham in months, not even his own mother, who hadn't seen her son for a long time. However, even though no one had actually made contact with Abraham, they heard countless rumors about him. Some people said he was in Jamaica. Others believed he was hiding in Orlando. But when the police traced the origins of these rumors, they discovered one common point: they all came from Didi Moore. The question arose, was Didi really helping Abraham hide for some reason, or was she concealing a more horrifying truth? In the following weeks, as investigators closely monitored Didi Moore, everything started shifting from strange to suspicious. The deeper the detectives investigated, the more they felt something was wrong. Initially, they thought this was just a missing person case, but over time, a more terrifying suspicion emerged. Was Abraham Shakespeare even still alive? A crucial discovery surfaced on April 6, the time Abraham was believed to have disappeared. Before that, his phone had been working normally, but after that day, everything abruptly changed. Abraham's phone wasn't completely silent, but investigators noticed something odd. Every time Abraham sent a message or contacted Didi, both phones connected to the same cell tower. This couldn't be a coincidence. It suggested that Didi Moore was likely in possession of Abraham's phone and was using it to mislead people. But even though they suspected her, there was still no direct evidence proving that Didi had killed him. So was Abraham really in hiding? Or had something terrible happened? 2 days before Christmas, after months without any sign of Abraham, the police decided to confront Didi once again this time. They wouldn't let her easily escape their tough questions. And this time, they were determined to make her tell the truth. On Christmas Eve 2009, after more than 8 months of disappearance, something unexpected happened. It seemed that someone other than Didi Moore had finally heard from Abraham Shakespeare. Abraham's mother received a mysterious phone call. The voice on the line claimed to be her son, but the call ended quickly. Even stranger? The call came from a private number, making it untraceable. Less than 24 hours later, investigators took action. They tracked the GPS signal from the phone call and traced it to a shopping mall in Lakeland. Without hesitation, they rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they spotted something familiar: Didi Moore's car parked in the lot. At that moment, Didi was meeting a man, handing him something before quickly leaving. Investigators immediately approached. Could this be the elusive Abraham Shakespeare they had been searching for? But as they got closer, they quickly realized a shocking truth. The man in the car was not Abraham. It was Greg Smith. When questioned, Greg revealed that Didi had just paid him $5,000 to call Abraham's mother and pretend to be her son. But Greg had no knowledge of Abraham's actual whereabouts. He simply believed the millionaire was in hiding to avoid those searching for him. However, when investigators revealed the truth, that they suspected Abraham was dead and that Didi Moore might be responsible, Greg made a decision that changed everything. He agreed to cooperate with the police. Mid-January, 2 weeks after Greg Smith agreed to cooperate, the Polk County Sheriff held a shocking press conference. He announced that the disappearance of Abraham Shakespeare was now considered a murder case, and the prime suspect was Didi Moore. Didi reacted with complete surprise, claiming she was utterly shocked by the accusation. But just a few days later, she proactively reached out to Greg Smith, and that was her biggest mistake. Greg immediately reported to the investigators, and they quickly devised a trap. They instructed Greg to call Didi back. mentioning someone with a drug-related criminal record in the federal system, someone who could take the fall for Abraham's death. Dee Dee took the bait instantly. She wanted a meeting. On January 21, the meeting took place. But there was one thing Dee Dee was unaware of. The man she believed would take the blame for her was actually an undercover police officer. During the meeting, Dee Dee was cautious but couldn't entirely hide the truth. She insisted that the police were trying to set her up, but vaguely admitted that Abraham was dead. However, she also added something strange. He will return. He will return on Christmas. But then Dee Dee revealed her true nature. She offered to pay the man to take the blame. She was willing to pay any amount, but the undercover officer didn't stop there. He continued to press her, pushing Dee Dee to reveal details about the murder and the location of Abraham's body. Dee Dee hesitated, but eventually said, "Let me see if I can find out." That sentence was enough to mark a turning point in the investigation. The trap was closing in, and Dee Dee Moore's time was running out. 4 days later, on January 25, Dee Dee Moore arranged another meeting with Greg Smith. But this time, she didn't just bring words, she brought deadly evidence. In her hands was a .38 caliber Wesson revolver. She handed it to Greg without hesitation. Then she drove to a house in Plant City, a house she had purchased using Abraham Shakespeare's money. Upon arrival, Dee Dee pointed to a specific spot and coldly said, "His body is right here." Greg Smith knew he had just obtained the most crucial piece of evidence. He immediately reported to the Polk County Sheriff. Less than 24 hours later, investigators arrived, quietly beginning excavation, while dozens of reporters from across Central Florida watched their every move. The search lasted nearly 48 hours. And then, on January 28, the horrifying truth was finally revealed. Abraham Shakespeare's body had been found. Identified through fingerprints, the medical examiner concluded that Abraham had been shot twice in the chest. As the news spread, grief filled the air. His family was present at the scene, their cries echoing through the crowd, "God will bring justice." But investigators didn't have to look far for the prime suspect. The moment Abraham's body was discovered, Dee Dee Moore did something no one expected. She called the police herself. "We need to talk." At the investigation office, Dee Dee gave a dramatic account. She claimed that the person who killed Abraham wasn't her, but a man named Ronald. According to Dee Dee, one night in April, Abraham walked into her office with Ronald and another drug dealer. They demanded money from a safe, but everything quickly spiraled out of control. Abraham argued with them. Then they shot him. Dee Dee continued, claiming that the killers took all the money from the safe, forced her to transfer more, and even pointed a gun at her face. "I was so scared," she emphasized, trying to convince investigators that she was just another victim. But this time, no one believed her anymore. Dee Dee's story might change, but the evidence did not. The interrogation ended, and shortly after, the Polk and Hillsborough County Police worked together to finalize the arrest warrant. Since Abraham Shakespeare's body was found, reporters had swarmed the crime scene. But they didn't stop there. They also camped outside Dee Dee Moore's house, waiting for any movement from the woman suspected of being a murderer. Then, on February 2, surrounded by cameras, Dee Dee finally emerged. No more avoiding, no more hiding. She faced the media. A defiant, yet emotional Dee Dee. Sometimes, everyone has moments of feeling terrible. She choked. She cried, her voice trembling. But were those tears of remorse, or just another performance? After her final words, Dee Dee got into her car, preparing to leave as dozens of cameras captured every moment. But she didn't know that this ride wouldn't take her home. The moment she started her car, she was blocked. Police swarmed in. Right then and there, Dee Dee Moore was officially arrested, charged with first-degree murder. Tampa, Florida, November 28, 2012. Under the glaring lights of the Hillsborough County courtroom, Dee Dee Moore was led in. The once glamorous woman with golden blonde hair now looked more haggard than ever after nearly 3 years in custody. Today, she stood trial for the most ruthless crime, murder for money. Prosecutors wasted no time, opening with a sharp statement. Dee Dee Moore took advantage of Abraham Shakespeare's kindness. easily manipulating him due to his lack of financial knowledge. And when she could no longer drain him of money, she chose the quickest and most ruthless way to take everything by killing him. To prove this, they called a financial expert who had meticulously analyzed every account belonging to Dee Moore and Abraham himself. Bank statements, checks, and transactions showed that by the spring of 2009, Dee had complete control over Abraham's remaining lottery winnings. She spent lavishly like a queen: Dom Perignon champagne, Rolex watches, diamond jewelry, a $90,000 Corvette, and luxurious vacations from Las Vegas to New York. But the key turning point in the case came on December 5, when a crucial witness, Abraham's former personal assistant, took the stand. She recounted that in late March 2009, Abraham had frantically come to her. He told her he had tried to withdraw money from the bank, but discovered that his account had been emptied. Completely devastated, Abraham realized that his financial advisor, the person he had trusted, was actually the one who had stolen all his remaining money. Determined not to stay silent, this witness called Dee directly, confronting her about the fact that Abraham had discovered the truth. Just a few days later, on April 6, 2009, Abraham Shakespeare vanished forever. Although there were no direct witnesses to the murder, prosecutors believed they had pieced together enough evidence to reconstruct the chilling truth of how Dee Moore murdered Abraham Shakespeare. They admitted that no one had seen the exact moment Dee pulled the trigger, but her own words had inadvertently provided a solid theory. Dee had told investigators that a mysterious drug cartel had shot Abraham right in her office and stolen all the money from the safe. But prosecutors asserted no such cartel existed. There was only Dee Moore and Abraham Shakespeare. According to the prosecution's theory, on that fateful day, Abraham had gone to Dee's office. As he walked in, she opened the safe, making it seem as if she was about to give him his money. But instead of pulling out a stack of cash, she took out a gun. 2 gunshots rang out. Abraham collapsed. Then Dee began erasing the evidence. A search of her office after her arrest revealed crucial evidence. A portion of the carpet had been cut out, and when analyzed, investigators found traces of blood soaked into the floor. DNA analysis confirmed it was Abraham Shakespeare's blood. The final and most damning piece of evidence, the .38 caliber revolver that Dee had given to Greg Smith, the police informant. When examined, the bullets recovered from Abraham's body were a perfect match for that gun. On December 10, 2012, the Florida jury delivered its final verdict in the trial of Dee Moore. The former nursing assistant and 40-year-old businesswoman was convicted of first-degree murder. After days of intense deliberation, they needed no more time to consider. The decision was clear. Dee Moore was found guilty of murdering Abraham Shakespeare. Her sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. From a woman who once lived lavishly off her victim's fortune, Dee Moore now faced the rest of her life behind bars, a place with no diamonds, no luxury cars, and no more lies to cover up her crime. Ruby in Ruffalo, a sharp mind, she almost achieved straight A's in law school. Her husband John was no less intelligent, but tragedy struck when he mysteriously died. John's death sparked an investigation filled with shocking accusations, and chilling secrets gradually came to light. It was as if a voice from beyond was guiding the truth into the light. Can a dead man speak? Or is someone playing a dangerous game? Amid the grief of widowhood and the whirlwind of legal battles, Ruby was forced to fight, not only to seek justice for her husband, but also to protect her own freedom. Langford, British Columbia, October 25, 2003. After a week of relentless rain, a hiker followed a trail in Mount Wells Regional Park, on the outskirts of Victoria. The narrow path ran parallel to an old, abandoned drainage pipe. As he stepped down near the pipe, he suddenly froze. Something looked strange. Emerging from the darkness of the pipe, something sent a chill down his spine. A hand. His heart pounding. The hiker realized he had just stumbled upon a corpse. Without hesitation, he immediately called 911. Within minutes, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived at the scene. The body of a white male, in his mid-30s, was discovered in the West Shore area of Langford. No identification, no visible wounds. He hadn't been stabbed. He hadn't been shot. But what had killed him? The victim's identity was quickly confirmed. John Ruffalo, 36 years old, who had been reported missing 5 days earlier by none other than his wife, Ruby. Ruby Anjuba was born in 1956 in a remote community in Terrace, British Columbia. From a young age, she showed intelligence and promise, enrolling at the University of Victoria. However, upon arriving in Victoria, a familiar pattern began to emerge in her life. Ruby dropped out, got married, quickly divorced, and then fell into a new relationship. Unfortunately, both relationships were fraught with abuse. Each romance left her with a child, and by the age of 30, Ruby was struggling to raise 4 children on her own. Life became increasingly difficult, and in 1986 she decided to return to her family's farm in Terrace. But 2 years later, in 1988, she left once again, this time returning to Victoria without her children. Back in the city, Ruby was determined to change her life. She went back to school, completed her degree, and it was there that she met John Ruffalo, a man 11 years younger than her. Despite the age gap, they quickly formed a bond. John was outgoing, charismatic, and passionate, while Ruby was drawn to his warmth and devotion. In April 1990, they got married. Ruby's children from previous relationships remained with their family, while she and John built a new home together, welcoming a daughter. Although Ruby had a university degree and John did not, she chose to stay home to care for their child while John became the family's breadwinner, working hard to support them. As Ruby continued to pursue her education, John became increasingly involved in real estate. However, studying law was never easy, and life wasn't always smooth. In 1998, shortly after Ruby graduated from law school, John suddenly faced charges for violating the Real Estate Act of British Columbia. Once again, turmoil struck, presenting new challenges for their marriage. John eventually broke the law and was convicted of 22 offenses. However, instead of serving prison time, he was only fined $14,000 and forced to give up his job as a prison guard. Meanwhile, Ruby's career was also struggling. Despite graduating from law school, she found herself unemployed, unable to secure a foothold in the industry. Marital tensions escalated. The relationship between Ruby and John became so distant that they no longer even shared the same bed. Long work days and the pressures of life made the household atmosphere suffocating. Even their 12-year-old daughter, Giovanna, could sense the growing rift between her parents. That summer, John seemed increasingly detached from his family. One night, he bluntly asked his daughter, "Do you want me to leave?" Giovanna, though still a child, understood that her parents' marriage was on the verge of collapse. Yet John promised her that he wouldn't go. But that promise didn't last long. Not long after, John mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind unanswered questions. On the evening of October 19, 2003, just before 11:00 p.m., the shift manager at Brink Security called Ruby Ann Ruffalo. His voice was tense as he asked, "Where's John? He didn't show up for work." Ruby was confused. She didn't know where John was, or over the phone, her bewilderment was as evident as the manager's concern. But the real worry began the next morning when John still hadn't returned home. Ruby started feeling uneasy. She turned to Vivian Kirkland, a close friend who lived in the basement apartment of her house. The two women quickly went to the police station to report John missing, but the police remained unfazed. They told Ruby not to worry because John had been missing for less than 24 hours. "Maybe he just got drunk somewhere and will be home soon," they reassured her. However, the day passed with no sign of John. By evening, when the 24-hour mark since his disappearance was reached, his family and friends were genuinely alarmed. John's phone rang nonstop. Messages flooded in. Ruby seemed to be spiraling into panic. One of her tenants recalled that she paced back and forth incessantly, so anxious she was nearly frantic. By October 22, 2 days after John was reported missing, his family began to believe that something terrible had happened. That afternoon, John's brother-in-law was refueling at a local gas station when he suddenly recognized a familiar-looking car. As he moved closer to inspect it, he confirmed it was John's car. But John was nowhere to be found. Alarmed, his brother-in-law immediately called the police. When officers searched the vehicle, they found a suspicious detail. John's wallet was still inside, along with his identification. This raised a series of questions. Why would John abandon both his car and wallet? Where had he gone? And most importantly, what had really happened to him? The police immediately tried to contact Ruby to inform her of the discovery and to ask more about John. Strangely, it took them until the next day to reach her. Shortly afterward, the police received a call from Ruby's lawyer. He said that Ruby wanted to meet with them and was willing to assist in the investigation. When Ruby arrived at the police station, she wasn't alone. Beside her was Vivian Kirkland, her loyal friend. During the interview, Ruby explained that Vivian was there for emotional support, while her lawyer accompanied her to ensure everything proceeded properly. When asked about her husband's disappearance, Ruby admitted that it was highly unusual. John would usually call me or leave a message, she said. But then she followed with an even more shocking claim. John might have been involved in a dark secret. According to Ruby, John had a habit of using drugs. She had even left him briefly because of it, but they eventually reconciled. However, she never fully trusted him. And just days before John went missing, Ruby claimed she had found evidence to support her suspicions. While cleaning the house, she discovered that John had hidden a large sum of cash, $7, taped to the back of a cabinet. But when the police searched Ruby and John's home, they found no trace of the cash she had mentioned. The $7 had vanished, and so had John. Was this merely a coincidence? Or did John have a real reason to hide the money? Were drug dealers hunting him down? A new theory began to emerge. Perhaps John was on the run due to debts owed to drug traffickers. But to the police, this scenario seemed unconvincing. John's family didn't believe it either. As investigators continued to track and verify Ruby's statements, they noticed a major issue. There was no evidence to suggest that John was a drug addict. A heavy user couldn't possibly manage 3 jobs at once. It was almost impossible. John's sister outright rejected this theory. There's no way he would just leave, she insisted, worry etched across her face. And as each day passed without any sign of John, his family began to fear the worst. Saturday, October 25, 6 days after John's disappearance, a hiker descending from Mount Wells Regional Park stumbled upon a horrifying sight: the body of a man inside an old drainage culvert. Panicked, he immediately called 911. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police quickly arrived at the scene, calling in a crime scene analyst to assist with the situation. As investigators pulled the body from the culvert, they compared it to a photo in the missing persons file. The results confirmed the family's worst fears. The deceased man was John Ruffalo. The grief of losing him was already devastating, but the way he was found left his family even more haunted. What had killed him? At first glance, the body showed no signs of beating or obvious violence. Hoping to find answers, investigators hiked up the mountain to what was believed to be the entrance of the culvert. There, they discovered discarded drug paraphernalia. This evidence seemed to align with Ruby's claim that John was a drug user. But was it really true? Had John overdosed and died tragically? The police weren't entirely convinced. Something felt off. Drug addicts didn't typically wander into the woods to inject themselves. And if John had truly been an addict, why did none of his family and friends believe it? On the night of October 26, 2003, officers from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police knocked on the door of Ruby Ann Ruffalo's home in the suburbs of Victoria. Just a day earlier, a hiker had discovered the body of her missing husband, John Ruffalo. He was only 36 years old. Ruby had reported John missing 6 days prior. Just 2 days before his body was found, she had told investigators that John was a drug addict, possibly in debt, and even suggested that he might have taken his own life due to the pressures of drugs and money. At first glance, John's death seemed to align with Ruby's statement. But was that really the case? While John's family and friends mourned his loss, investigators began asking questions. An initial theory suggested that John might have taken his own life with drugs, but there was a major problem. Many details didn't add up. If John had truly walked up the mountain to inject himself, why was his car found abandoned more than 8 miles away? And if John hadn't gone there himself, then who had taken his body up the mountain? The next question, who had done it? On October 28, 2003, an unexpected witness came forward, providing police with a shocking statement. This witness was Robert Johnson, a man struggling with alcoholism. He claimed that Ruby Ann Ruffalo, along with her close friend Vivian Kirkland, had approached him and offered him an $8 bottle of sherry, a cheap bribe, but one tempting enough for someone like Johnson. But the most shocking part was Ruby's request. She wanted him to do a special job, a gruesome task, to kill John Ruffalo. Johnson recounted that he had immediately refused. However, Ruby didn't give up. She listened to Johnson's suggestion for a more discreet method of murder, a hot shot, a lethal overdose of heroin, ensuring the victim's death without leaving any trace of foul play. This statement could not be taken lightly. Police recalled what Ruby had previously claimed, that John was a drug addict. They had also found drug paraphernalia near where John's body had been discovered. Everything was starting to connect into a suspicious plot. But Johnson's story wasn't over. He went on to reveal that on the night of October 19, the night John disappeared, Ruby had contacted him again. When Johnson arrived at her house, he was shocked to see Ruby and Vivian Kirkland standing in the driveway with John's lifeless body. Ruby had offered him more alcohol in exchange for his help disposing of the corpse. But once again, Johnson refused. He walked away, leaving Ruby and Vivian standing there with a dead body and a dark secret. If Johnson's story was true, this was a premeditated murder. But what puzzled the police was the motive. If Ruby truly wanted her husband dead, why had she only offered Johnson a cheap bottle of wine? And for someone with a law degree like Ruby, why would she attempt to recruit a homeless alcoholic to carry out her plan? As police were still considering the credibility of Robert Johnson's testimony, 2 more unexpected witnesses came forward, making the case even more disturbing. This time, it was Jonathan Horton, an 18-year-old, and his mother, Linda, a former tenant of the Ruffalo family. Linda revealed a shocking truth. More than a year and a half before John's disappearance, Ruby Ann Ruffalo had approached her son and offered him money to kill her husband. Jonathan told the police that he had immediately refused. But instead of letting it go, Jonathan's mother, Linda, confronted Ruby directly. Ruby's reaction? Not a single denial. In fact, according to Linda, Ruby even repeated the offer to her, offering to pay her to kill John Ruffalo. And once again, the offer was rejected. This revelation raised a puzzling question. If John knew that his wife had plotted to kill him, why did he continue living with her for another year and a half? Any ordinary person who discovered their spouse wanted them dead would immediately go to the police or leave. But John didn't. The reason might lie in another secret one that John's mother revealed to the police. John Ruffalo had been having an affair, and he was planning to file for divorce. Toxicology results seemed to confirm Robert Johnson's account of a hot shot, a lethal dose of heroin strong enough to kill instantly. But there was an even more crucial detail. Although Ruby had claimed John was a drug addict, there were no signs of chronic drug use. Only a single needle mark was found on John's arm. This suggested that the fatal heroin dose could have been his first and only injection, one that someone else had administered. Not only that, But heroin wasn't the only substance found in John's body. Tests also detected amitriptyline, a drug that can cause paralysis and render a victim defenseless. Could Ruby have mixed the drug into John's food or drink, knocking him unconscious before injecting him with heroin? The only problem was, how could police prove it? On March 3, 2004, the investigation into John Ruffalo's mysterious death took a critical turn. Police searched Ruby's home, including the basement apartment of Vivian Kirkland, her close friend and a potential accomplice. There, they found a prescription and a bottle of amitriptyline in Vivian's room. A chilling coincidence. This was the exact drug found in John Ruffalo's body during the autopsy. On March 4, 2004, Canadian police returned to Ruby Ruffalo's home. This time, they weren't just there to gather more evidence, they were there to arrest both Ruby and Vivian Kirkland. Ruby Ruffalo, the prime suspect, was completely stunned as the handcuffs snapped around her wrists. She didn't utter a word, but the shock was evident on her face. Soon after, both women were taken to the police station. As the interrogation room door closed, Ruby remained eerily composed. She refused to make any statements and immediately requested a lawyer, a classic move for someone well-versed in the law. But Vivian Kirkland was different. Held in the interrogation room next door, Ruby's closest friend became the center of the investigation. Detectives were determined to uncover her true role in John Ruffalo's death. At first, Vivian tried to deny any involvement, but how long could she stay silent when the evidence against her kept piling up? On March 3, 2009, nearly 6 years after John Ruffalo's body was found in the woods outside Victoria, British Columbia, and almost 5 years after Ruby Ruffalo's arrest, she finally stood trial for her husband's murder. John's family had waited far too long for justice, and what angered them most was that Ruby had spent nearly 5 years out on bail, free as if nothing had happened. With a law degree from one of Canada's top universities, Ruby knew the legal system inside and out, and perhaps she had used that knowledge to delay the case, hoping it would fade into obscurity. But Judgment Day had come. That morning in court, the prosecutor opened the trial with a statement that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Ruby Ruffalo had killed her husband because he was leaving her. But this was not just a crime of passion. John had planned to divorce her, and that meant dividing assets, a prospect Ruby could not accept. To her, everything they owned, from real estate investments to every dollar in their bank accounts, belonged to her, not to John. And when she realized she might lose it all, Ruby took action. But the prosecutor had more than just a theory. They had a crucial witness, someone who had once been Ruby's most loyal accomplice, Vivian Kirkland. After years of protecting Ruby, standing by her side like a shadow, Vivian finally broke under the weight of the investigation. She testified, exposing the entire murder plot that Ruby had orchestrated. With overwhelming evidence, on November 18, 2010, the judge delivered the final verdict. Ruby Ruffalo was guilty of first-degree murder. Her sentence, life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. After nearly 8 years of uncertainty, pain, and despair, John's family could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Justice had been served. The man they loved, a husband, a son, a brother, had not died in silence. Though nothing could ever replace their loss, at least they knew that the perpetrator had been rightfully punished. Under the blazing fire in the dead of night, Melissa and Gary Cole's home was reduced to ashes. As firefighters rushed to the scene, they weren't just battling fierce flames, they were facing a chilling mystery. Was this a tragic accident, or a crime concealed beneath the fire's fury? For 11 years, Gary had promised Melissa a better life, a refuge from the wounds of her past. But was their marriage truly a safe harbor, or were there cracks beneath the surface, waiting to shatter? As the embers cooled, only one question remained. What really ignited the destruction, a faulty heater or a deadly secret? Under the silent night sky of McNairy County, Tennessee, On November 3, 2009, a 911 call pierced the calm at 1:00 a.m., shattering the peace of the neighborhood. A panicked neighbor reported a fire at the home of Gary and Melissa Cole. "We woke up to the smell of smoke," the caller said. "My husband stepped out onto the back porch and saw their house engulfed in flames. Firefighters raced to the scene, red lights flashing against the billowing smoke. Onlookers held their breath, fearing for the lives of Melissa, Gary, and their 9-year-old son. If they were still inside, their chances of survival were grim. When the flames finally died down, all that remained of the house was a charred ruin. As firefighters sifted through the smoldering wreckage, they made a grim discovery, a burned body on what was left of the living room couch. It was a man. But if that was Gary Cole, where was Melissa? And had their 9-year-old son vanished with the fire? Melissa Broadwater, known as Missy to her family, grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, with a childhood marred by trauma. From an early age, she endured abuse at the hands of her father. After her parents' divorce, she and her mother moved to Nashville, seeking a fresh start. But that hope was short-lived when her mother, Kay, remarried a man just as cruel. That marriage also ended in violence, leaving Melissa with deep emotional scars. These wounds shaped her into a rebellious teenager. At 17, she met James Bear, a 24-year-old electrician. Despite her mother's disapproval, she ran away with James and married him in 1987. When she became pregnant with their first child, Melissa felt happier than ever. Their daughter was born in 1988, followed by a son 3 years later. For over a decade, Melissa devoted herself to being a full-time mother. By 1998, she decided to return to work and took a part-time job at the electrical company where James worked. But working together didn't bring them closer. James was nearing 40 while Melissa had just turned 30. They drifted apart, their love fading. Melissa felt neglected, isolated in her own marriage. Then a co-worker took notice of her, Gary Cole. Unlike James, Gary was carefree, funny, and had a way of making Melissa feel special. What started as harmless jokes soon spiraled into a full-blown affair. Things became even more complicated when Melissa discovered she was pregnant with Gary's child. And this was only the beginning of a tragedy no one could have predicted. What shocked everyone the most wasn't Melissa's affair, it was the decision she made afterward. Instead of leaving Gary to return to her family, she chose to walk away from everything. Melissa's family was stunned when they learned that the once devoted mother had abandoned her 2 children, an 8-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl, to pursue a new life with another man. Shortly after giving birth to Gary's child in 1999, Melissa cut off all contact with everyone, including James and her children. She and Gary moved to rural McNairy County, starting a new chapter. But just months after their son was born, in the spring of 2000, Gary began to change. His family noticed the difference. He was no longer the carefree, light-hearted man he used to be. As he reached his 40s, he struggled with the physically demanding nature of construction work. Financial pressure weighed heavily on the couple, and the marriage they had once dreamed of was no longer a fairy tale. After years of silence, Melissa unexpectedly reached out to her family. When she returned to Nashville with her youngest son, she was a completely different person. Her mother was shocked by the change. Missy, once bold and impulsive, was now timid and guarded, as if she were constantly afraid of something. Her eyes were empty, and whenever someone asked what had happened, she would evade the question with a simple, "I'm fine." No one knew exactly what had changed Melissa. Back at the burned house, as the sheriff's department began searching for her and her son, a terrifying truth started to emerge. They didn't know if the mother and child had been kidnapped or if they had fled. But as firefighters examined the ashes, they noticed something strange. The kitchen knives hadn't burned in the usual pattern. Instead of being scorched upward, they had burned downward, an unusual sign that suggested the fire hadn't started naturally. And if the fire wasn't an accident, what had really happened to Melissa Cole? McNairy County, Tennessee, November 3, 2009, around 1:30 a.m. The blaring red lights of fire trucks sliced through the darkness as firefighters rushed to the scene. Melissa and Gary Cole's house was engulfed in flames, the inferno raging too fiercely for any hope of survival. As the fire was finally brought under control, the firefighters began searching through the wreckage. A small crowd of friends and family gathered outside, anxiously waiting for news. Then, a devastating discovery: a charred body, seemingly that of an adult male, possibly Gary Cole. But Melissa and her son were nowhere to be found. People desperately tried calling Melissa's phone, but there was no answer. Meanwhile, authorities carefully collected what remained of the body, placing it in a black bag and sending it off for forensic examination. The remains were so badly burned that identification was nearly impossible. But the biggest question now was, where were Melissa and her son? Once the body was removed, the scene was turned over to the arson investigation team from the McNairy County Fire Marshal's office. Their job was difficult, dangerous, and time-consuming. A trained arson detection dog was also brought in to assist. But before the investigation could even begin, one of the experts noticed something crucial. With their experienced eye, they spotted an anomaly in the kitchen. The burn patterns didn't rise as they normally would. Instead, the fire had spread downward onto the floor, suggesting that a flammable liquid had been poured before the fire was set. Whether it was kerosene, gasoline, or some other accelerant, one thing was certain: this fire was no accident. The flames had started in the kitchen, but who had set them? And more importantly, where were Melissa and her son? While the arson investigation team continued working at the scene, the family was desperately trying to contact Melissa. Every call went unanswered until a few hours later, when Gary's brother checked his voicemail and discovered a message from her. "Has anyone seen Gary?" Melissa's voice in the message showed no sign that she was aware of what had happened. She didn't mention the fire, nor did she sound panicked or distraught. It was as if she had no idea about the tragedy that had occurred. Gary's brother immediately called her back, and this time Melissa answered. When he told her that their house had burned down and that Gary had died in the fire, she seemed shocked. He urged her to contact the sheriff immediately. That afternoon, Melissa arrived at the investigation office. Just hours after being informed that her husband had died in a devastating fire, she appeared dazed, but something seemed off. She told the police that Gary wasn't even supposed to be home at the time. According to Melissa, her husband had left town for a job interview in Memphis and had told her he would be gone for 2 to 3 days. She also explained that she had taken their son to Nashville to visit family, which was where she was when she received the call from Gary's brother. But if Gary was in Memphis, how could he have died in a fire at their home? When investigators spoke with Gary's family, they were equally confused. Melissa insisted. "Gary never goes anywhere without telling me first, and he certainly wouldn't leave town without informing his mother." So, had Gary actually left, or was he hiding something? And if he wasn't the one who started the fire, then who did? At the West Tennessee Regional Forensic Center, the autopsy results confirmed that the body recovered from the ashes was indeed Gary Cole. But what shocked investigators even more was the cause of death. Gary had not died in the fire. He had been shot. A single 9mm bullet was found lodged in the back of his head, a fatal execution-style shot. Police quickly ruled out the possibility of suicide. Someone had stood behind Gary and pulled the trigger. By the afternoon of November 4, more than 24 hours after the devastating fire, dental records finally confirmed the victim's identity. But now, this case was no longer just about a tragic house fire. It was murder. The fire had destroyed nearly the entire crime scene, making it difficult for investigators to find clues. But one thing was clear: Melissa and her son were not present when the fire broke out. This immediately put them at the top of the list of people to investigate. Gary's family told police that the couple had been struggling financially. Their debts had been piling up for the past 3 years, and the situation had only gotten worse. However, One surprising detail made investigators hesitate to suspect Melissa. If Melissa truly wanted to be free of Gary, she didn't need to kill him. On August 10, just 3 months before the murder, Gary had filed for divorce. If Melissa wanted out of the marriage, all she had to do was wait. So why was Gary murdered? And more importantly, who pulled the trigger? Just like when she left her first husband, Melissa seemed ready to walk away from her son with Gary. She did not fight for custody. In fact, she agreed to give Gary full parental rights. What was even more unusual was how peaceful their separation appeared to be. Melissa continued living in the house, sleeping in the back bedroom, while the divorce process was being finalized. But then something changed. Melissa began regretting giving up custody. That's when McNairy County authorities started asking more questions, especially about the timing of the divorce. November 5. The McNairy County Sheriff summoned Melissa for further questioning, this time asking her to bring her son with her. At the station, investigators separated the two, placing them in separate interrogation rooms. While Melissa waited, detectives focused on questioning her 9-year-old son. And then something unexpected happened. His story was completely different from his mother's. Contrary to what Melissa had told police, her son confirmed that his father was home that night. He also clearly remembered the night before the fire. On Sunday night, I was sleeping when I suddenly heard a loud bang. I woke up and ran out to see what had happened. Mom was standing there. I asked her what the noise was. She said she was wrapping Christmas presents and had accidentally dropped something. The police immediately knew this was a lie. Then, the boy continued, after that, I went back to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I saw Dad lying on the couch, completely covered by a blanket. I asked Mom what was wrong with him, and she said he was sick and told me not to touch him. Then she took me out for the whole day shopping. Mom told me to stay in the car while she bought things like a mop and cleaning supplies. The boy did not fully understand what had happened. But based on his story, investigators formed a terrifying theory. Melissa may have tried to clean up the crime scene, but her 9-year-old son had been there the entire time. After completing the interrogation with the son, the investigators entered Melissa's interrogation room. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. It was no longer a casual conversation like 2 days before they directly confronted Melissa with her son's testimony. Faced with mounting evidence, Melissa quickly broke down. With no way out, she was forced to confess the truth. According to Melissa's confession, on the morning of November 2, she and Gary had an argument while their son was still asleep. Initially, it was not a major fight, but the situation quickly escalated to a dangerous level. In a fit of rage, Gary stormed into the bedroom and then returned with a gun. Melissa claimed that Gary forced her to sit down in the living room, placed the gun on his lap, and threatened her. According to her, Gary suspected that she was reconsidering their custody agreement and planning to take their son away. After a tense standoff, Gary decided to put the gun back in the bedroom and returned to the sofa in the living room. Eventually, he fell asleep. At that moment, Melissa made a fateful decision. She believed she was in danger, that she knew exactly what kind of person Gary was, and that she needed to protect herself. She walked into the bedroom, took Gary's gun, and then returned to the living room. As Gary slept soundly on the sofa, Melissa raised the gun and pulled the trigger. Gary Cole died instantly. Although she admitted to shooting her husband, Melissa denied setting the house on fire. She said, "I didn't set the fire." "I don't think so." This vague statement raised suspicions among investigators. She neither fully denied her involvement in the arson, nor took responsibility for it. However, the fact that Melissa had killed her husband was undeniable. As soon as the interrogation ended, the sheriff's deputies entered the room and arrested Melissa on charges of murder. The trial begins. Nearly a year after Gary Cole's body was discovered in the smoldering remains of their home, 42-year-old Melissa Cole walked into the courtroom to face charges of murdering her husband. According to the prosecution, this was neither an accident nor an act of self-defense. They argued that Melissa had planned the murder to secure custody of her son, with their divorce set to be finalized in just 1 week. That fateful night, instead of allowing the legal system to determine the outcome, she picked up a gun, aimed it at the back of Gary's head, and pulled the trigger. Prosecutors charged her with first-degree murder and opened the trial with testimony from fire investigators who uncovered multiple signs that the house had been deliberately set ablaze to cover up the crime. However, the most crucial witness was none other than their 10-year-old son, who recounted the mysterious noises that night and his mother's strange behavior afterward. In contrast to the prosecution's accusations, Melissa did not deny shooting Gary, but she insisted it was an act of self-defense. She testified that for years, Gary had physically, emotionally, and sexually abused her, controlling every aspect of her life. On the morning of November 2, 2009, she claimed that Gary threatened her with a gun, forcing her to act first to protect herself. But one critical question remained. If she was truly an abused wife, why not wait just 1 more week for the divorce instead of killing her husband? Was it desperation or a calculated plan? Was she a victim or a murderer? The answer would be decided in the courtroom. October 7, 2010, the verdict inside a McNairy County courtroom in Tennessee. Melissa Cole sat in silence, awaiting her fate. The 42-year-old woman stood accused of shooting Gary Cole in the head, then setting their house on fire to conceal the crime. Throughout the trial, Melissa never denied pulling the trigger but maintained that she had done so as a battered woman fighting for her life. However, the jury remained unconvinced. In their final verdict, they found her guilty of murder, though not first-degree murder as originally charged. Instead, they convicted her of second-degree murder, acknowledging the killing was intentional but lacked the premeditation required for a first-degree charge. Additionally, the jury found her guilty of arson and evidence tampering. In the end, the judge sentenced Melissa to 25 years in prison, 21 years for second-degree murder, 4 years for arson. As the sentence was read aloud, Gary Cole's family breathed a sigh of relief, believing justice had finally been served. But for Melissa, was this truly punishment or just the next chapter in the tragedy of her life? I can't generate an image right now, but could you describe the scene in more detail? For example, the surroundings, the girl's emotions, or the dominant colors in the picture. This will help me prepare a better description when I can create images again. The trial of Ana Trujillo. With all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the trial of Ana Trujillo With all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Ana had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. Despite her conviction, the trial of Ana Trujillo, with all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Ana acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Ana as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Ana waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Ana stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Anna had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. Despite the trial of Ana Trujillo, with all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Anna acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Anna as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Anna waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Anna stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Bananoy, type tok chat GPT, tuanoy. That was the final part of the story. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Anna had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer. The trial of Ana Trujillo, with all the evidence against her, investigators officially charged Ana Trujillo with murder. On March 31, 2014, she walked into a packed courtroom in Houston's Harris County Courthouse. The case had become a media sensation. Headlines labeled her as a 45-year-old massage therapist accused of brutally murdering her 59-year-old scientist boyfriend. The public was captivated by the shocking details. During the trial, both sides fought fiercely to prove their case. The defense argued that Anna acted in self-defense, that Stefan had attacked her, and she did what she had to do to survive. The prosecution, however, completely disagreed. They painted Anna as a violent and aggressive woman who had mercilessly beaten her partner to death. In the courtroom, prosecutors made their final plea. Ana Trujillo savagely murdered her lover. Nothing stopped her from doing it. Nothing will stop her from doing it again. She deserves a life sentence. Put her away forever. Then came the moment of truth. Anna waited anxiously as the jury deliberated. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty. The verdict: a life sentence. Ana Trujillo was found guilty of murder. The jury rejected her self-defense claim, concluding that she had intentionally killed Stefan Anderson. But the most shocking moment came after the verdict. Instead of breaking down or showing remorse, Anna stood up defiantly and declared, "I do not regret what I did." She showed no fear, no remorse, no concern, only cold defiance. The judge and jury had seen enough. Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of Stefan Anderson. Her weapon of choice? A 5.5-inch high heeled shoe, a murder so shocking that it left an entire city in disbelief. Final part of the story: Ana Trujillo was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Stefan Anderson. After the trial, the case continued to attract public attention due to its bizarre nature, a high-heeled shoe used as a deadly weapon. Many people debated whether Anna had truly acted in self-defense or if she was a cold-blooded killer.